Love it or hate it, RuneLite is by far the way the majority of the player base enjoys old school RuneScape. A lot of players like to judge each other for the plugins they choose to use. Now, it's not my place to say if somebody is using too many plugins. It's a game, so I think it's fine to say, play how you want to play. But you, the viewer, are a smart person. You can read. You're looking at this title and you think, what do I mean by too far? Let's imagine, just for a second, there's a plugin, and you turn it on, and you have a 10% chance that your attacks do 1 damage more. It's a very, very minor upgrade to your damage, but it is an upgrade that's impossible to achieve on the normal client. This plugin doesn't exist, obviously, but there would be an outrage if it did exist, right? Just use RuneLite would be the obvious solution. But there is a sizable portion of the player base that plays on mobile and doesn't have access to plugins. And there's another group of players that is very vanilla and doesn't like or want plugins in their game. Should they be at a disadvantage for not using a third-party client? My thoughts on this is that a plugin should be the equivalent of training wheels, nothing more. A plugin that tells you which items in your bank can be stored elsewhere so you can get more bank space, this is perfectly acceptable. Somebody can use the wiki, or they can just have plenty of game knowledge, and they would be able to accomplish the same thing. What about a plugin that tells you where your character actually is? People with a lot of experience in the game understand the tick system and the tile-based movement, and understand this and may not need these plugins. If you're new to RuneScape, this is different than pretty much any other MMO out there, and plugins like TrueTile do an excellent job of showing how this system actually works. Even something like tile markers that tell you where to stand in places like the Inferno. A good player, somebody like Bodhi or Wooks, can do this just as well just by using their eyes. Sure, it makes it easier, but it doesn't give any sort of mechanical advantage of using one client over another. And not to mention that tile markers exist on the vanilla client and on mobile now. Now hopefully I've given you a good idea of what I think an acceptable plugin is. And your immediate argument to these next points may be the message at the top of the plugin hub. External plugins are verified to not be malicious or rule breaking, yada yada yada. So they're okayed by Jagex and couldn't be too much of an advantage, right? Well, let's talk about this. There are over 1,000 plugins. Do you really think each plugin has been looked over an appropriate amount? Even things like the Watchdog plugin got nerfed because it was too powerful in places like the Coliseum or Sodaseg. So we have precedents for plugins being nerfed in the past. It would be crazy to think that it's not happening now, or that it could happen again in the future. Normally, when you do things like drop a bunch of items or equip a bunch of items, it does it based off of the tick system. But with this plugin, it shows what is happening instantly. Even though in reality, it has to match the tick system for it to really happen, it just makes it look a bit more smooth without giving any real advantage. Well, kind of. There may be a few uses of this, but look at me spam clicking between the axe and the pickaxe. You can see my player character isn't actually switching equipment as fast as I click, so there's no advantage here, right? Except when I equip the pickaxe, the axe is instantly in my inventory, which gives me access to my options menu so I can drop it before it's actually been unequipped. Let's use the Visual Ticks plugin to illustrate this. Normally, I would equip an item on tick 1, then I would be able to drop it on tick 2, and it would be on the ground on tick 3. This plugin allows me to bypass this and both equip and drop the item on tick 1, so the item is on the ground at tick 2. Now, here's the crazy thing. I really like this plugin. It makes gear switches feel very smooth, especially at places like Vaso, where you need to switch gear really quick while moving at the same time. Now, I know this sounds pretty nerdy and that it wouldn't actually be used anywhere, but this is actually pretty useful in the Theater of Blood, where you have to use the staff and then you drop it to pass it along to your other teammates. And you may argue that you're only saving a few ticks. And to that, I would say you haven't tobbed with people before. They are very anal about their ticks. And I would also say that RuneLite shouldn't have access to these mechanical advantages the official client doesn't. I really like RuneLite and I like plugins, but if it's impossible for the best of the best players to do this type of thing, then it shouldn't be allowed. Hey, make sure to like and subscribe. I'm trying to hit 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. Thanks. So there's a PVM standpoint where RuneLite gives a benefit that can't be replicated on the official client. What about something like PvP? A fairly important part of PvP in Oldschool RuneScape is catching a freeze. This stops your opponent from getting away, and it also gives you an immense advantage of being able to stand under them and switch your gear so they're not sure what to pray. I'm not here to argue if this is a good PvP mechanic or not. I'm an Ironman, so I only deal with this when I'm trying to escape or while I'm doing a few games of LMS. However, when I am doing LMS, sometimes I use the Entity Hider plugin, and this just feels like cheating. The effort my opponent is putting in to freeze me, step under me, and switch gear can mostly be negated just by hiding my character. Another plugin that I personally use, but I do feel is unfair, is the Wilderness Player Alarm. There are a lot of plugins that are contributing to make the wilderness feel safer than it should, but when I use this plugin, things like revenants almost become a second monitor activity. I don't even have to feel on the lookout for players. Just when my screen decides to give me a seizure, I click on the teleport. There is an argument to be made that all the shitters like Macoon that use AHK scripts or other programs to give them an advantage, they're out there, so you have the right to use something to your advantage. It's difficult to say what should be done, as PvP stuff is generally both sides of the equation trying to stack the odds in their favor.
Bye, have a great time!
So we've had a bit of a discussion where I feel plugins go too far in PVM and where it goes too far in the wilderness. But what about general skilling? Surely all the plugins for skilling are fine. Let's talk about everyone's favorite mining activity, shooting stars. You click on a star and you get an uninterrupted 7 minutes of AFK time before you have to click again. That's on RuneLite at least, because RuneLite has the logout timer plugin and you can set it to 25 minutes of idle time. Now, I don't think this is a ridiculous plugin. What I think is ridiculous is that the official client hasn't added this. I have no idea why they haven't added this either, because they add things like clue helpers and true tile and cock scouters to the official client. There's no way that this is that big of an endeavor to add into the main game. So this plugin fits into the criteria of this video of going too far simply because I think this plugin makes Jagex lazy. It's an undeniable advantage that RuneLite has over the official client, but the official client should most definitely just have this as a default option. And then there are the plugins that are in a gray area. Plugins like the Clue Helper plugin, where it's not really a mechanical advantage because you still have to click on the clue, and if you're extremely well versed, you would be able to know where to go. But realistically, it's impossible to read a clue step in a singular tick and be able to determine where to go. However, plugins like this get so much love from the player base that Jagex has decided to add them to the official client. In some cases, like the official Cock Scouter, the vanilla client is better than RuneLite. I personally believe that in about 3 to 4 years, RuneLite won't be a thing anymore. I see many players state that they wouldn't play the game without RuneLite, but I think they mean they wouldn't play without plugins. And because the official client is going to add plugins with the upcoming HD mode, I'll be surprised if RuneLite doesn't get phased out. Official client plugins are going to be much more accurate than RuneLite ones are, and the client will run smoother because of the new engine. Just like we talked about earlier, there are over 1,000 plugins in the RuneLite plugin hub. I obviously haven't explored every single plugin, but I have used a fair few. There are a few other plugins that I feel are just too overpowered. But because more and more plugins keep getting added, it doesn't make sense to make a definitive list of overpowered plugins. I am curious to know what you guys think though. Which plugins on RuneLite do you think could go too far and past the point of being quality of life and straight into buff territory? If you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe helped me out a ton. I hope you all have a fantastic day.